Expand your awareness on society, culture, relating the path of transformation, and live life with your soul fully aligned with God. You have arrived to the Steve Experience podcast.
I'm on the line with Niki Kala. She's an orgasmic activator recommended to me by a very dear friend of mine, and I checked out all of her work, or most of her work, and some seriously great stuff we're going to talk about in terms of orgasm today. So how are you doing, Niki?
Hello, I'm great.
Yeah, great to have you on. We're on the opposite side of the world, connecting through orgasm. Maybe we can light up the world through this conversation. So
We can definitely light up the world with orgasm, that's for sure.
yeah, I look forward to discussing this. I think about orgasm a lot, but I don't get to often talk about it with someone on a level that I think we're gonna dive into here. So it's gonna be good. So my first question to my guests, new guests, is how did you get into all of this? Where did you start? How long ago was that? I imagine it was quite a journey.
Yeah, it was. Well, dedicating myself to orgasm probably started about 5 years ago now. And that started with getting into orgasmic meditation. You've probably heard of that.
I have done it.
Sweet. Orgasmic meditation's the bomb.
Yeah, I was in the community in Austin, Texas for a few months.
Oh, yeah, nice. And that really got me present to a lot of things that I hadn't been in awareness of around my sexuality in general. But really going back to the core of when learning about orgasm started for me, I was probably about 6.
Wow.
And I didn't know what was happening with my body, like I didn't understand it. And I remember asking all of my friends at school, we were in like kindergarten or something, and I figured it had something to do with reproduction. I was having these like visual pictures in my mind and I didn't understand what they meant. So I remember I climbed up this tree at my school. We weren't allowed to climb the trees, but at like play lunch or sometime, I snuck up this tree with this girl and we started to talk about how to make babies. Anyway, she told me this like horrifying story about being bitten by spiders and then having like thousands of spiders explode out of your belly.
Wow.
So I was like completely horrified. And in that moment, I vowed to myself that I would like never do that, because that sounded super scary. And so for many years, I kind of like shamed the sensations in my body and kind of was afraid of sexuality and sensuality. And I've always been a really sensual kind of person. And so I grew up also in a household, in a culture that sexuality was kind of shamed. It was not part of my upbringing very much. And it really took me to a place where I was super secretive about when I started to explore sexuality because I was really afraid of it. So during that time, like, it's almost like I felt like I led a double life. My secret orgasmic life was really hidden away, and then kind of normal life was over here. And it really wasn't until 5 years ago when I really started to do this work more deeply that I actually allowed like the parts of myself to merge. And it was really liberating for me. And that sense of liberation that I experienced, that sense of like empowerment and knowing who I am, that was what had me know that it's important for me to stretch my comfort zone and share this work with the world and dedicate my life to the kind of expansive nature of orgasmic intelligence in the way that it had me reconnect with the core of who I am. And I want that for everyone.
Yeah, the shame is a massive thing. The shame is in so many aspects. Like it's just this clear light and day of no shame and shame, but then there's subtle shaming, which really it can be. For example, I was listening to Russell Brand on a podcast
Mm-hmm.
last night,
Mm.
and he's definitely not anti-sex and stuff, and he's had a woman on about the orgasmic meditation a few months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a great podcast. But
Mm.
he was talking about
Yeah.
how the Buddhists
Mm.
they have this energy about them that they're so connected to source energy, and that they really don't need sex or lust or anything like that, which
Mm.
which may be true for them, may be true
Mm.
for them. But there are other people out there who think, yeah, you can have that, but then there's so many benefits of orgasm and being in the animal,
Mm.
such as like
Mm.
health benefits being a sort of one. I mean, maybe we want to talk about some of the benefits next. Like, why
Sure.
why should we be interested in orgasm with all this shame, rather than us talking too much about all the
Mm.
shame? Let's actually talk
Mm-hmm.
about the real benefits of what it can give us. From my point of view, there's so many benefits in terms of feeling my own
Yeah.
body and feeling what is possible within my own body. I mean, when I was 13, there's no way I could have imagined what I can do with my body now in terms of moving the energy around it, having kind of
Totally.
orgasms in almost every part of my body, these 15
Mm.
minute long brain orgasms that
Mm.
I've had,
Mm.
being able to feel another woman's orgasm just
Mm-hmm.
with through my finger, and that sending pulses up
Yeah.
my spine and stuff, that was from orgasmic
Totally.
meditation. I mean,
Definitely.
maybe you can get these things on your own through your mind, but I don't think so, to be honest. You need a visceral experience, and these expanded experiences of yourself um
Mm. Well, I'm going to
are
disagree with you
invaluable.
right there just for a second, though.
Okay, go for it.
And I was about needing the like visceral stimulation. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, yeah, you can have things on your own. Um,
Yeah.
I'm a,
Well, like what I
I'm
wanted to bring up there
okay.
was you can orgasm just from breathing. Like you don't
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to do
yeah,
any
yeah.
or touch any.
That's I would still call that a visceral experience. What I meant by visceral is
Right.
just that it meant
Huh.
it was an experience in my body that was so
Oh yeah, got
intense.
it.
There was an
Right.
intense experience in my own body.
Huh.
So yeah,
That makes
just to
sense.
sum up from my side, that just these experiences in my own body that
Mm.
continue to get more and more expanded just
Mm.
gets me to feel more and more love, more and more orgasm, more and more pleasure, and pleasure is healing. So
Yeah, it
yeah,
is.
if you want to talk about some of the benefits perhaps from your life and what you've seen in
Mm.
your clients and
Mm.
things like this.
Absolutely. One of the major benefits that I see on a really general health well-being level. Ooh, that's a cool glass.
Yeah, sacred glass.
It's nice. Is just the way it increases the actual conductivity of our body through our nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So it really clears the channels in the body for higher level of electricity basically moving through us, and our whole system operates on biochemical electricity. So that fact alone has like all our cells operate like from the mitochondria up at a high level of functioning. It's one of the markers for vitality and youth is they measure the kind of conductivity of the cells. So that in itself is a huge indicator for
Yeah, it's
health and
big.
well-being. And that really impacts the whole like autonomic nervous system. It impacts all of our hormones, all our organs. Orgasm is also associated with activating the pituitary and pineal glands. And the pituitary being like the kind of central distribution center for our like hormonal data and information and releasing through the brain. And the pineal being about our third eye, or even the way that it creates DMT in the body and things like that. So those are really part of the way our sensory system works. Our pineal gland is related to how we interpret our sensory system or the data that runs through there. It's like the higher order consciousness that processes that. And I see that as a way to access orgasmic intelligence. So it gives us connection to kind of a field energy that has a lot more information than just the physical realms.
Mm. Yeah. So for you, is it majorly a health issue? Is that how you kind
I
of
mean,
think
it's a
about orgasm?
well, not like an issue, but like a source of vitality. It's my own life force energy. It's my own prana. It's my own like energetic body that I'm like nourishing. And that has impacts um, all through my physiology. It has impacts on my mental capacity. It has impacts on my relationships. Like my whole system as a holistic device or operating system, or however you like to think about those things, benefits from being in that frequency of energy. You know, it creates heart coherence, which creates brain coherence, and then the cells come into an alignment with the whole coherence of being. Have you heard of heart maths?
Yeah.
So it's like super cool with heart maths and things like that.
Yeah. So we're realizing just in this conversation that orgasm is a place of great potential for improving our
Mm,
health and improving our lives. And there's really
mm,
no need to shame it.
yeah.
From our point of view, but then we have to start. The only way we can do this is on our own, and that means taking responsibility for our own orgasm. And how important is that?
Mm. Totally important, totally important. What I actually speak to a lot of women about, especially, is that a lot of women tend to kind of outsource their orgasm to their partner
Mm.
or a lover or something like that.
Or a vibrator.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And whilst it's beautiful to share those experiences with people, what I definitely think is that you can certainly build up a lot of internal frustration and potentially like bitterness and anger and all these other emotions when you feel sort of sexually unrequited, let's call it. And a lot of women have beliefs around their orgasm as though they can't have one, or a lot of women experience, probably I'm going to say about 40% of the women that come to me because they can orgasm on their own, but they struggle to orgasm with a partner.
Mm.
So for me, that place is like about a level of surrender or a level of like willingness to go out of control and things like that. Um, and that relationship, I feel anyway, with women or people in general outsourcing their orgasm to someone else, it creates a codependence, I think, in relating,
Mm.
because it's sort of like I will sacrifice myself and I'll do anything I can to get that thing from you. And that actually kind of blinds and obfuscates us to our true desire and connection. You know, like if somebody isn't willing to meet me in a place that feels good and resonant for both of us, then it's actually pretty hard to generate orgasm from that place without force. And, you know, I don't know if you've read Power versus Force, but orgasm's much more
Yeah, I
about
think I
power
have.
than force.
Yeah, it's interesting you say around the surrendering part, especially
Mm.
uh for women. Is that totally true, or do you have to kind of tell the women to be more commanding in the bedroom in terms of what they need? Like they might need more
Mm.
presence, they might need more love, might be something like that, so that they're
Well,
speaking
I'm
what
not
they want.
actually talking about surrendering to a person. I'm
Okay.
talking about surrendering to the orgasm.
Okay.
Yeah, like see, I see that
So
as
they
quite
are surrender.
different.
So the assumption is they are have a happy relationship. They just can't get to the orgasm with their partner. Is that the right?
Yeah, that's probably what that's like about 40% of my female clients. I have male clients as well, but about 40% of my female clients have that situation where they know how to find their own pleasure. But, you know, what I'm really teaching them in that place is how to expand their range of sensation. So often they're taking a very linear trajectory to reach their orgasm, and they're kind of pointing themselves at a peak climax. And the depth and breadth of orgasmic experience versus climax is actually about letting the energy move and letting yourself receive it rather than pushing the energy towards, like towards the climax.
Yeah, that's
Um,
totally true for men as well,
yeah, yeah,
for both
yeah,
sexes.
yeah.
I mean, we might need to speak about where we can get these expanded experiences on our own, or
Mm,
maybe if we
mm,
going to a massage or something, perhaps. But maybe start with
mm.
on our own. Where do we start with expanding our sensation?
Well, the first step, in my opinion, is like slowing down and paying like exquisite attention to like every moment, every sensation, every nuance of emotions, every smell and taste and sound, like just really expanding the senses into the moment very deeply. And in doing that, it's been my experience that time actually slows down a little bit in that place and becomes kind of elastic, and there's a lot more data to be processed, and the volume of data to be processed in that small amount of time, or in the same amount of time, but in that small focused attention, actually expands the sensation that's available.
Mm.
So it sort of like opens a big pipe of data, sensation, whatever you want to call it. I see those things as kind of similar, it's all just like energy.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I
Mm,
remember being at a workshop about orgasm.
mm,
He was saying how he would go around just when he was starting his journey of just sensing objects and plants and
mm,
animals and just what
mm,
feels different, like really what feels different. And for me,
mm.
I can do that very, very easily now. But when you're first starting out, you're like, okay, what am I doing? But just you have to kind of.
Mm. I reckon it's be willing to like feel ridiculous.
It is a little bit, but we do have these feelings anyway. I mean, if I'm in an empty room now, I think you are as well, and people listening might be.
I
Someone would know if it was dark and there was no sound that someone else would be in the room. Like we have senses like
Yeah,
that.
totally.
And then
Yeah.
this is just going further down the scale of okay, you can sense an energy of a dog or a human being in the same room. What
Hmm.
about a plant? How does that change the
Hmm.
room? What about
Hmm.
getting
I
closer to the
reckon
plant?
rooms feel super different when plants are in the
Yeah, I've
room.
got plants in the corner. You can't see them right now, but
Yeah,
yeah, they're huge. They make a huge difference to a room.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and we're affected by architecture and all these things. It's just going down
Totally.
to the minutiae rather than just thinking, oh, I need a
Mm,
huge piece of object or person to affect my energy. No, you can feel these subtle things all the time. And then
absolutely.
feeling them with your breath as well. I was going to say is the next thing, and I'm sure you would agree, and you were going to talk about it. It's like just breathing these
Mm,
sensations around your body, especially when you're in a high climax situation, but
mm,
also in these smaller moments when you are with a dog or your pet, or just like breathing
mm,
into
mm,
the moment and spreading the
mm.
sensations around, whatever kind of sensation it is, even if it's anger or whatever,
So
just like breathing it through you. How
I
important is
agree
that?
with that. I see that breath is the way that energy is in motion in our bodies.
Mm.
It's just this consistent motion. Even if I'm laying completely still, there's probably 10 billion different things moving around or more. The number is endless. I don't even know the answer in my body. There's cells moving, um, there's blood moving, there's electricity and chemistry and electrons being transferred in every second, even if I'm in the stillest, deepest meditation. So the thing that has me feel those things, I believe, is started by the breath, the oxygen entering my lungs and the molecules being transferred into my bloodstream. So that's just like bellows of life of me. I don't think we can ever separate that from our experience.
No, I agree. yeah, I invite people listening just to notice their breath at the moment, like how shallow it
Mm,
is, how deep it is. For me, I can feel it down to my toes sitting here,
mm,
because we do get stuck in rhythms, and the more aware we can be
mm,
of changing that rhythm into a more deeper and heartfelt sense
mm,
of breathing, then yeah, life becomes easier and more peaceful, I think. That's
mm.
part of the reason why a lot of these meditations that people do are just focused on the breath, maybe holding the nostril, the yogic nose, and then pushing out.
Mm, mhm. Yeah, well, some of the work I do in the broader sense, like when I do one-on-one work with people, we go quite deep, but I do often workshops that are like orgasmic breath work with people.
Mm,
So that's kind of like a safer way for people to approach the work where they don't really know what it is or what's going to happen. So that if they know they're going to like a workshop where it's just about breathing, that it's safe, they've got their clothes on, and they can actually have their bodies get activated into the sensations in a way that doesn't activate any of their pain body or their shame or, you know, those kind of things that are related to sexuality. You can really start to move those energies and access and connect to them. I think it's important to clear those deeper energies, definitely. But I think as a first step, it's really important for people to approach their orgasm, especially if they have uncertainty about it, in a way that feels safe.
yeah, I experienced that when I was first starting out. I went to, it wasn't an orgasmic workshop, it was just a breathwork workshop,
Mm,
w-
mm,
um, where we got to do the shamanic breath work, and then do, is it like little art pieces after we'd gone through
mm.
it to express what was going through it in kind of paint or colors.
Sweet.
That was super
How did
intense.
that feel?
Well, I was a bit skeptical at first, as I was before most things, with even with orgasmic meditation and all the other different things I've done.
I
Uh,
think it's good to have a healthy amount of skepticism.
yeah, and then after a couple of minutes of breathing, I was deeply in it. I lost control of
Mm,
where I was. Started going to this wolf energy where my hands were
mm,
kind of holding this big ball of energy. Um,
cool.
and it was crazy. Um, and then yeah, things started from there. I started experiencing wider and more varied orgasms just after that, because it
Mm,
activated something.
totally.
Um, yeah,
Often when your hands go into kind of motions and postures, if you're in like breath work and orgasmic states, it's kind of like a Kundalini activation.
yeah.
Mm.
I've had many of those through the years. I had one about
Mm.
2 weeks ago, which was insane.
Oh,
Which
tell me about it.
because I was about going into a snake energy in the middle of a
Oh,
workshop while people were watching me. So there was 40 people around me, and then I've done ayahuasca, and it was kind of like ayahuasca was going
mm,
through my cells. It was take this snake kind of energy and dragon energy was biting at my cells and then rising
oh,
up through my body, and then I had
mm,
to do like emotional release stuff to get it all out, and it
mm,
was pretty, I wouldn't say traumatic, but it was just intense. And
mm,
I've done that before in kind of in the middle of group workshops, and then it felt like a new energy
mm,
body came into me, and I was like, what the
mm.
fuck. I wish someone had, you're not allowed cameras in those things, but I wish someone had recorded
Yeah.
it, because honestly, it was insane.
Ah.
It was a 20-minute of insanity stuff. Any, anyway,
Mm,
uh,
mhm.
I wanted to ask you, so where do you get your orgasms, and how many do you need to satiate you? Or is there not a, it's
Right.
not a number. I don't think you need a number, but like,
No, it's not a
isn't,
number.
yeah, I know. I knew that I knew that after I said it. But how how do you feel satiated generally through orgasm? Like, what is there specific
Mm,
things you need to
mm,
do each day, or is it, how does it work?
mm. Well, actually, I see satiation as a choice,
Mm-hmm.
like a state, a choice that a state that I can choose.
Mm.
But what I also believe about that is that it requires reaching a certain level of like energetic fullness to be able to choose that state at will.
Mm.
So, what I'll definitely say about that is that earlier in my practice, like probably 3 or so years ago, I would do maybe up to about 2 hours a day of orgasm practice. Now I probably do at least half an hour a day, probably 5 days a week. Like sometimes, life happens or it doesn't happen or I don't feel like it or whatever. But, on like a really good day, I might do like an hour and a half.
For anyone just listening to the audio, Niki looks very orgasmically satiated right now. So
I'd love for
I don't
you
know if
to
it's the
describe, what
lighting
does an
or
orgasmic satiated person look like?
I think glowing. The skin is glowing. The eyes look much more awake and alive. Like you're moving your body a lot through the podcast and allowing energy to move through just sitting there. That's a sign of satiation. It's probably the most obvious one. Smiling a
Thank you.
lot, almost like you're high but not.
Yeah.
Well, high. I mean, Salvador Dali said get high off your own supply, and I think this is kind of one thing of
Well,
what he means.
actually, like that's a really important point to bring up, I think, because if you really think about the brain chemistry that's involved in getting high, like be it on drugs or whatever you choose to use or do, I don't have any judgment about those things, but basically those like neurotransmitters and chemicals are really similar to orgasm, like dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, like all of those things are actually, in the common drugs that people like to take. Cocaine, I think, is dopamine, serotonin. Ecstasy is like endorphins and serotonin and oxytocin, like all of those things contribute to feeling good. Like it's not an accident that people want to take things that stimulate or get into activities that stimulate the production of neurotransmitters. One of the really few drugs that actually penetrate the brain barrier, like DMT, for example, is naturally produced in the body.
Yeah.
But most of the other kind of drugs just have a similar molecular shape to our natural neurotransmitters, and they actually like either flood the brain with neurotransmitters, or they like fit into the synaptic transmitters and actually replicate our neurotransmitters that have us feel like we're high. So, if you can do something that's really healthy for you, that has you feeling like you're high, and it doesn't, for me, as far as I'm concerned, there's no downside, there's no side effects, it lasts for ages, it's like promoting health and well-being, like I actually can't think of anything bad about it.
No. I can't either.
And actually, I mean, I'm be honest, like when I was young, I used to experiment a little bit with party drugs or whatever. I just have no desire for that because, like, well, reality is totally like being high if you choose that state,
Yeah, for me, I don't really take any drugs. I do smoke a little marijuana from time to time, but alcohol, no. I mean, I use marijuana intentionally to create with, because I do a lot of writing and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I don't have any about that stuff, but I just love the feeling of being in that high state and also having access to my like consciousness and my whole brain and like my intelligence,
Yeah. I think things affect people differently, but there's no, in terms of drugs, but there's no, I don't think there's much difference in orgasm. Orgasm is just, everyone knows what they're getting when they get doses of these expanded orgasms that we've been talking about. And that's why it's reliable. You don't necessarily need someone else if you have lucky to have a partner to share with, or if you go to take a tantric or massage, something like that, to if you have the money to spend on that to experience that, because I think those are very valid.
And they can be very healing if you have a practitioner that you feel safe with and that's well recommended and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little more difficult from being in a woman's body to find the right practitioner.
It's challenging.
Yeah, but from the male point of view, speaking to any men listening from my side, you might want to give some recommendations for women in a second. And I think I've said this
Mhm.
before, but yeah, the sacred sexuality teachers out there. I'm lucky to live in a city where there's many of them. Um,
Mm.
they offer a completely different ritualistic experience and a
Mm.
very healing experience and expanded body experience. If you're thinking about going to
Mm.
one, I would recommend
Mhm.
finding someone you trust and checking it out if you're kind of new to this and you want
Totally.
some guidance at the beginning. Yeah, I know
Mm.
you offer services, right? I saw on your website in Sydney, but yeah, maybe some
Yeah.
words on the importance of the people doing this work and
Mm.
how women can find the right person.
Definitely. Well, what I will say about it is that I agree with you that it's important to find someone that you feel safe with. And I would certainly always seek recommendations. So if it's not someone, for example, that you know personally, or that someone that you know has recommended and you're just like looking on Google or something like that, it's really important to like contact them and make some kind of phone contact or conversation and really listen to how you feel about the person and see if you can try and get some kind of like context or background for how long they've been working for or what their qualifications are if you're concerned about it. But I certainly recommend people get guidance or recommendation around it and really know what they want, like what their intention is. If you don't go in with your own intention, it's really easy to get kind of sidetracked by someone else's desire or intention. Um, so a woman might go into it wanting to explore her own pleasure, or she might want to go into it to clear up some of her sexual shame. She might want to go into it to find new sensations or heal places that have numbness or trauma, you know. So there's a lot of different reasons and actually different practitioners
Mm.
with potentially different modalities cover those different kind of things, you know. If you've got numbness and you don't really know what's going on, you might want to try something like yoni mapping. Um, if you want to explore kind of understanding your pleasure, you might want to go maybe to a tantric practitioner who might go a bit more into like energetics and breath work and things like that attached to it. So there's lots of different ways. You know, you might want to go the shamanic route.
Yeah, I recommend all of those things that Nikki was saying
Mm.
in terms of if that's something calling you and to just be
Mm.
careful and
Self-exploration is like really important too, you know. It's like it's great to have someone else guide you and also like be willing to be there with yourself. I personally believe like nobody can take you somewhere that you're not willing to go, right? So to have the internal safety of knowing what it's like to go there actually allows you to come out a little bit more to explore and share with others. Everybody's a little bit different, you know, like some people like to have another person show them their body, and that's okay too. And still, in that sense, there's a piece of that that has, in my experience, people say, well, they can't do that without the other person or without the other, you know, what, then that person can kind of own your orgasm a little bit, you know, like
mm,
I've spoken to women who have like, oh, and I had this lover and it was amazing. And we had this, you know, activating a huge experience and I opened my third eye with his cock and whatever happens. and, um, and then they're sort of sad and dejected and feeling like, oh, they can't have that anymore. Or he doesn't like me. And they get all like caught up about all this stuff. And I'm just like, if you've had that experience once with someone else for whatever reason, it means that your energy field knows how to go there and you can go there yourself. It doesn't matter if another person takes you there first or you go there yourself first and then explore it with someone else. But basically, like once your system has expanded its range to a certain place, you can always go back there. It's always available.
yeah, I 98% agree. I just haven't
Same
found.
old.
Well, I can't lick my own forehead, and that can put me into a massively big. There's no other type of stimulation. I've tried rubbing myself with like oils on my forehead, but there is no freaking way I can experience the same thing without someone licking my forehead. So that's the only thing with that.
What about if you were to go into like a deep meditative experience of like remembering and connection to yourself and that person in the timeline where you had that experience, and to call yourself into that energy field to reinvigorate those sensations? That sounds like homework for you.
Yeah, I mean, I can have it with any person. As you like you say, it doesn't really matter what the tongue is. It doesn't even matter if they're experienced in tantra or anything. It doesn't matter. It just needs to be a moving live tongue. I think I could have a phantom tongue lick my forehead. Like if you
that's pretty hot, like a spirit tongue.
Yeah, I mean maybe, but it would. I think it still needs an interaction with another. Say if you try.
FYI, now that we're having this conversation, I have like a stripe of hate on my forehead from here to here.
Yeah, I feel like we are kind of connected to the third eye right now. I think if you projected orgasm in my head, I would probably go. But I don't know if everyone wants to watch that. But we could. I'm sure we could do it. So those are the types of things that are possible. Yeah, those. Sorry?
I said, is that something that you desire?
Maybe it should be more private. Okay. So yeah, what I'm saying is, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I definitely can have as intense experiences in my body on my own. It's just not specifically in my brain and on the forehead. It's more in the entire brain. When that's connected, the whole brain goes. And
oh my gosh, have you ever had one?
On fire.
Yeah, they are on fire. Have you ever had one of those like Ayurvedic massages things where they like drip the hot black sesame oil on your forehead?
Yeah, in Colombia I did, yeah.
Oh my god, that's so good.
But I should have asked for
that just reminded me of that in that moment.
I think I only asked for a short one, but I'll have to go back. Maybe that'll set me off.
Totally will.
Maybe we should talk about your favorite orgasms now.
Whoa! Favorite orgasms?
Yeah.
Like ever or in general or whoa?
Wherever you want to go, really.
Whoa. Favorite
or most memorable ones for you or personally, like what really sticks out? It can be solo, it can be with someone. It doesn't matter if they're with someone.
Yeah, you know what? Oh, there's so many. Probably the most sublime orgasms I've ever had have been during orgasmic meditation. In the like level of sensitivity and sensation. And for me, the way they access orgasms that are so layered in like the energy body field for me. And for me, the orgasms from orgasmic meditation are many and varied, but the ones that really stand out have this feeling of like a huge lightness in my body and almost like a layer of light that I can see inside of everything. Those really, really rock my world.
Wow. Yeah. I remember and if people don't know, in the orgasmic meditation process that you normally have to give reflections and things like that, and I remember hearing just such deep things afterwards.
Yes.
Because people don't often talk after sex about the orgasm that much, or they don't know how, so they don't know how to answer the questions. They're not normally asked it, but it's something you kind of, it's useful to ask to get a snapshot of that moment.
It's a beautiful place of connection and intimacy to share our like deep, like to reveal more of who we are and how we feel and what things mean to us. You know, there's so many layers in our experience.
Yeah, and I remember having to give reflections back of what it was like to give the whole experience. Those are very beautiful. Um,
Mm,
any other ones that stand out? Perhaps not orgasmic meditation.
yeah. I did a really awesome money manifestation, sex magic, sacred ceremony last week.
Mm.
And I actually almost felt like my bones were shaking.
Wow.
It was really transformational, and I saw so many things. You know, this is one of the things that's important to me about orgasm, is that when you really open yourself to it, it actually brings layers of intelligence and consciousness that it's my experience that I don't have access to unless I'm allowing those energies to move.
Mm.
And that's in the form of knowings and of things coming towards me that I wouldn't normally have a sensitivity to or understanding of or experience of. And they might be like little subtle things about being in flow, or they might be just seeing 3 or 4 things and noticing that they're a pattern and that they're related, you know, somehow. So those nuances, I believe, come from having a heightened sensitivity to sensation in the body, which gives me, I think, more access to my senses, so I can process more data, and then I can have a deeper understanding of the world around me and who I am in it, and access to more of the intelligence that's always there.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's an important moment to bring up intention. I often kind of
Mm, hmm.
talk about on the podcast, but
Totally important.
when I tend to take one intention through kind of all my life and all my orgasmic experience, and that one intention is the highest good for me and the planet and
Mm,
and the actual universe
yeah.
is given up through
Mm,
orgasm
yeah.
and my creations. I don't know whether I should just dial that down a bit or that intention down or
Why would you
actually
do that?
I don't know to get more laser focused, but that's pretty laser focused as it is. And then that's what I do. What do you do for
I
intentions?
do.
You did a
I
money
definitely.
intention when this
I
one?
did,
Well,
I did the other day a money intention. I'm also a spiral practitioner. I don't know if you know about spiral.
mm,
It's like and it's an emotional clearing tool. It's like one of the tools I use in my orgasmic activation process. And it's a tool to do emotional clearing. So, like removing the kind of density from the emotional, energetic, and physical body so that more orgasmic energy can move through.
mhm.
There are many different amazing tools for emotional clearing. This is just a one that I like because it's efficient. And anyway, I was doing a level 1 spiral clearing, which is really all about like the base chakra, so security, finances, the visceral animal nature of like being here on this planet. And I really felt into when I was doing it, I felt a layer of shame that I hadn't accessed before around receiving money sort of in exchange for sexuality, even though I'm like not technically a sex worker and I have no judgment about that. I noticed that I had this layer of judgment about it within myself. And I was like, well, that's not okay. You know, like I believe in this work so deeply. I believe that orgasm wielded with intelligence and integrity is a beautiful, powerful thing. And having integrity around my work is super important. And that was part of it, you know, like actually letting the integrity and consciousness of orgasm be more powerful than the judgment of shame of receiving money for helping people access their orgasmic energy, their sexuality, their power. Um, and so, because as soon as I recognized in the spiral clearing that that energy signature was there, one of the integration tasks that I set myself for the clearing was to do this sacred sexuality ceremony.
Mm.
Um, And so to witness the energies that moved around that was sort of me deepening into understanding myself and that energy. And I believe that these energy fields are not just for me personally, although they are for me personally, but it's also on a kind of collective level and an ancestral level. You know, I can feel and see that the ancestral shame of my family around sexuality is something I've inherited. You know, I've inherited my parents' beliefs and understandings and their cellular data, their material in their DNA. And I was reading a really cool article the other day that they've done some research that says that the data in our DNA actually goes back 14 generations. So we're actually impacted from the emotional experiences still of 14 generations ago, which is insanely huge.
Unless you've done clearing. I have done clearing on it. There's a doctor, and I think there's maybe other way. You maybe tell me some ways of. Is that how you clear your ancestral stuff through the
Through
spiral thing?
spiral clearing. It is.
That's
It is.
one way.
So yeah, it's based in the kind of Eastern medicine and kinesiology system. So you do like you press on the meridian points and you do like the energy clearing. But I'm a fan of energy clearing. Like EFT is great, NLP is great, tapping, like all of the different ways. You know, shaking your body. There's so many different ways you can do shamanic breathwork practices, or I don't have a linear approach. I think whatever works for a person is good for them. You know, like try different things, see what feels good for you. The reason I chose to become a spiral practitioner is because I've been doing this stuff, personal development work, for over 20 years. And this is the thing that really had me see the potency and efficiency and depth of doing the work like that. And other things like talking therapy and going to acupuncture and all that kind of stuff is healthy and good. But for me, talking to a psychologist for like 5 years versus doing an 8-week process that had me remember things from my childhood that had me blocked in my beliefs now as an adult, that's just insanely good from my perspective, for me personally, and then for the way I can share that with people. It's profound.
Yeah, that's all very, very important stuff. I remember doing my own process on all of that when I was living in Orange County, LA, for a while, and I was living with this quantum healing doctor called Dr. Lagalera.
The healing is excellent.
Yeah, he pioneered his own technique from another technique which I completely forgot the name of, but if you're in California, I recommend him. And I recommend. I was living out the whole ancestral thing in my body one night, and I was living with him and another woman, and who was a healer, and I was living out one night. I completely lost my mind. It was another person, and they got me down on the table and went through the healing process and got it out. And it's incredibly important to find your path of healing with all these different layers. There's so many different layers, and always be patient with yourself is the one thing that
oh my god,
you
cannot force.
Yeah, you don't need to do it all in a week either, or 8. It won't all be done in 8 weeks or 10 weeks. It's gonna take years. So
that's true. I really didn't mean to.
Yeah, I know you definitely didn't.
To invalidate the time and length of process, you know.
Yeah.
Like for me, I know that I spent 5 years in a psychologist's office, and perhaps I needed to talk for 5 years before I did a spiral process. Like, who knows, right? Everyone's different.
Yeah. The things that work with the body and hopefully the mind connected as well, so you get some understanding of why what was happening, because sometimes I've been in situations.
I think accessing the emotional body is a very important integrated way to kind of delve more deeply into self-understanding, exploration, and growth.
Yeah. So often I think when I open myself up to the possibility of healing, which was probably when I was 5, 6, 7 years ago, I don't know. I literally set the intention. That was an intention I wanted. heal myself and be more of use and of service, and then these things come to you. You might have found this
Totally.
podcast, you might
Wow.
get some ideas from us, you might want to contact one of us, whatever, and then, or you go and find whoever you are in the world, in the outskirts of Goa, India, or wherever you live, because we have listeners all over the place. Even in Saudi Arabia, they listen where they probably need it most. So it's a crazy world. Yeah, where I think there's definitely something else coming through in the final orgasm question, because we're heading up to an hour. Maybe, I guess let's end with like, what's the full? You've come a long way on your orgasmic journey,
Yeah.
and speaking from your point of view now, as a summation, I think we've gone through quite a lot, like summing up in terms of why people should be interested in following a journey to find the power of their orgasm. Why is it, you mentioned earlier about the power thing, why is this more about power and pleasure, and why is that so important for people?
I think pleasure and power are very related to sovereignty. And in that way, if I don't know my own power, then somebody else is exerting their power over me, potentially. And I believe in the world we live in now, in the kind of dominant Western culture of things, that humans have become a commodity, and in the commoditization of humans, I see it as a kind of, well, it's a form of slavery, in my opinion. Our energy and attention, our focus is our power. So what I put my attention on is where my energy goes. If I don't believe that I can put it on myself to create what I want in my life, it means I'm putting it on what somebody else tells me I need to put it on, and therefore I'm creating something for them. And whilst there's nothing wrong with that, if you don't know you're in that system or that cycle, then what is your life for?
Yeah, I agree. I think I would add to that, around this whole thing around creation is incredibly important. The amount of ideas I have, uh, and useful ideas around business is kind of ridiculous when I compare it to other people. Not business owners, but just my friends who are starting in business, and I'm starting another business like this week. And I'm not saying I'm
What's
that.
your new business?
It's I'll have to tell you after. Um,
Okay.
but what I was gonna say is, and I'm not saying I'm the best at creation in the world. There's certainly people out there.
But you are for you.
Yeah, I create for me. Um,
Right.
and I think orgasm is so intrinsically linked with that.
Yeah. Yes.
Uh,
Imagine that it's the thing that actually is the spark that creates life in our biology.
yeah, and I think
Like channeling the energy of consciousness through climax creates life.
there must be some people that are just born with it. In some sense, born creators, born with their root chakra really open in their heart, and all these things. Maybe the filmmakers or the writers out there.
Well, I think everyone has the capacity for it. It's certainly very impacted by upbringing, lifestyle, culture, self-perception, and even, if you believe in those things, karma, or, things that you come into this life to kind of heal or move through to actually claim your true self or to be in your own power. And if you don't do it now, you may or may not have to do it again another time or not. Like there's lots of different opinions about that. But in that sense, we can either choose in our life to overcome the challenges that we have, or we can choose to kind of retract into fear, basically, and stay small and stay inside someone else's power dynamic, inside someone else's creation.
Yeah, or
It's like playing your own creation or be in someone else's. Neither is wrong. They're just different.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of a complex mix of, you were born into a world where a certain type of creation is pushed upon you, and then you're born and grew up in certain traumas. For example, I was listening to Russell Brand, as I said earlier, and he was saying he created most of his life. He wanted to be famous out of a trauma of like not feeling good enough. So he was like, "Oh, I'm going to be famous," and then he made it somehow, and he was like, "Oh shit, I don't actually want to be. I don't want all the things that fame offers me, but I want some of the things," and like blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So he went on a massive journey, and he obviously had a lot of sexual energy, had addictions to sex and stuff. But he was creating from a point of like trauma, but he's healed himself a lot through the whole process. He's a really good case study on like what it's like to be famous and successful, quote unquote.
Yeah. I see that as actually a sort of a part of growing up emotionally, you know. So if there's parts of us that are disconnected or trauma is a sense of like separation, something in you is wounded in a trauma moment, be it physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And so from that point on, that kind of separation is a part of us that stays at that age, basically. So that energetic frequency inside us, say with Russell Brand, the energetic frequency of like not being good enough, I think that's what you said, stays at whatever age that was, when maybe he was 3 or something. And then the rest of him grows up, he's in an adult body, but then there's that part of him that's kind of running him from his unconscious. Basically, the traumas get held in the body and they act through us. And then you find yourself doing things and you're like, why am I doing this? And a lot of people don't know why they do things, and they don't know what their actual true desire is, because that part of them hasn't actually matured and grown up yet. That's why I think emotional clearing is so important, because it really brings attention into all those places of trauma that have us separated from our true self.
Yeah. I mean, he went through that trauma, and then he had all the addictions with drugs and sex and fame and these things. And yeah, what we're saying is we can't. He's written a book on how to deal with addictions, but yeah, just going. It's a matter of the emotional clearing, and then maybe finding orgasm and using that as a fuel for life, rather than other things which can be detrimental to you and your family, such as drugs and gambling and all these even.
I definitely recognize that since I've been doing orgasmic practice, like I used to be, I don't often share this, but I used to be quite a heavy drinker, and it reached a point like probably 8 years ago where I was drinking like every single day. And for me, that's just like not okay to be doing that. And really the coming back to myself and getting connection to what really feels good, what my actual desire is, had me know that drinking was like a compensatory desire to mask feelings that I didn't want to feel, to help me feel certain ways when I didn't know how to access that. And then eventually habituated because I felt bad when I didn't have it. And that whole relationship had me disconnected from myself. And then when I found something that had me feel good naturally and actually increased my well-being, I had far less interest in other forms of like external medication or input to feel a certain way.
Yeah, so maybe you're convinced listening now that orgasm is maybe a good thing to explore. How
Orgasm a day keeps the doctor away. That's what I say.
I think we've ridden the rise, waves of orgasm. I think that's the saying. In terms of the length of this podcast, I think we might be the longest podcast I've ever done.
Oh.
So that's a good thing, as long as everyone's listening still. So, but anyway, where can people find out about your work and get in touch?
I'm on Facebook, Niki Kala Aloha. or I have a website, nikikalaaloha.com.
Yeah, I have a feeling we might be back on another podcast to talk about orgasm soon. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your time, Niki. It's been a great...
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Discover more about Steve's other creations, including his book, magazine, and much more at thesteveexperience.com. Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Much love and deep blessings to you on your journey. We can't wait to see you on the next Steve Experience podcast.